It was a sunny morning in Oak Grove, Colorado, promising a warm May day. Daniel Miller, a 31-year-old software engineer, sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee and looking at the calendar. It was his wife Sarah's 29th birthday, and he wanted to make it a day to remember. On the table was a neatly wrapped box with the Oak Grove Golf Club logo, containing a certificate for an annual membership. Daniel knew how much Sarah wanted to play golf, and despite his busy schedule working on his cybersecurity startup, he had been saving up for months to surprise her. Sarah, a yoga teacher with an infectious smile, came down the stairs, adjusting her blonde hair, which was pulled back into a messy bun. She was dressed in her workout clothes, ready for her morning workout, as always. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said, kissing Daniel on the cheek. "Were you up all night coding again?" "Not all of it," he chuckled, pushing the laptop away. "Happy birthday, my love." Sarah rolled her eyes, but her face lit up with joy. "You know I don't like it when people make an event out of this. Better tell me what you made for breakfast." Daniel pushed the box towards her. "Open it first. This is for you." She looked at the box with curiosity, then at her husband. "What's this? You spent a lot of money again, huh? Just open it, Sarah." She untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. She gasped when she saw the certificate. "Oak Grove? Seriously? Daniel, that's too expensive. Nothing too much if it makes you happy," he said, looking into her eyes. "You've been saying for years how much you wanted to play golf. Now you have your chance." Sarah threw herself on his neck, almost knocking over his coffee. "You're crazy, but I adore you. Thank you, really. I don't even know where to begin." "Start by signing up for training," Daniel winked. "They have the best instructors, I checked." They spent the morning talking about their plans. Sarah was already envisioning herself learning to hold a golf club and maybe even playing in amateur tournaments. Daniel listened with a smile, but his own worries were running through his head. His data security startup was on the verge of a major contract. His business trips to Denver were becoming more frequent, and he felt like he had less time for Sarah. This gift was not only a gesture of love, but also an attempt to compensate for his own absence. "Are you sure we can handle this?" Sarah asked as they drank their second cup of coffee. "I know you have a lot of expenses with the project right now." "Everything is under control," Daniel replied, although there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "The main thing is that you are happy, and I will sort it out." Sarah squeezed his hand. "You always figure it out. But if anything, I can earn extra money, take a couple more yoga classes." "Don't," he snapped. "I want you to enjoy yourself. This is your year, Sarah." She smiled, but there was a hint of worry in her eyes. She knew how hard Daniel worked, and sometimes she felt guilty for not being able to help financially. But today, she decided to put those thoughts aside. It was her birthday, after all. After breakfast, Sarah left for yoga, and Daniel opened his laptop to check his email. Among the messages was a message from an investor in Denver he was supposed to meet in a week. If all went well, his startup would get funding, and his life with Sarah could reach a new level. He leaned back in his chair, looking at the empty gift box. He wanted to believe that this certificate would be the start of something good for both of them. That evening, they celebrated at a small restaurant in downtown Oak Grove. Sarah beamed as she told her friends about her membership, and Daniel looked at her and thought that he would work around the clock for her smile. He didn't know that this gift, so carefully chosen, would soon become the cause of their most serious test. "To you," he raised his glass when they were left alone at the table. "To us," Sarah corrected, clinking glasses with him. "And do you not disappear into Denver too often?" "We have a deal," he said, although they both knew that this promise would be difficult to keep. When they got home, Sarah hugged him again, holding him tighter than usual. "Thank you, Daniel. This is the best gift in my life." He kissed her on the forehead. The morning in Oak Grove was crisp, with a faint smell of cut grass wafting from the golf course. Sarah Miller parked her old hatchback at the front entrance of the Oak Grove Club, still not believing that she was now a full-fledged member of this place. Her birthday had passed a week ago, and since then she had been looking forward to her first practice. In her hands, she held a bag with new clubs bought at a sale and a certificate that still seemed unreal to her. Today was her first lesson with an instructor, and she felt like a schoolgirl about to take an important exam. In the lobby of the club, she was met by the administrator, a young guy with a perfect smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," he said, checking his clipboard. "Your coach is already waiting on the training field. Nick Collins, our best. Come on, I'll show you the way." Sarah nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. She had never been a serious golfer, only hitting a few balls on a cheap course with friends. Now she was at one of the most prestigious clubs in Colorado, and she didn't want to lose face. On the training field, surrounded by neatly trimmed lawns, stood a man in his mid-30s wearing a white polo shirt and dark sunglasses. Tall, with tan skin and a light stubble, he looked confident in every move he made. As Sarah approached, he removed his glasses and smiled. "Sarah, right?" he asked, holding out his hand. "I'm Nick Collins, your instructor." "Yes, it's me," she said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not rough. "To be honest, I'm a little nervous. Golf is a dark forest for me." Nick laughed, and his laughter was so infectious that Sarah couldn't help but smile. "Don't worry, everyone starts somewhere. By the end of the month, you'll be hitting so hard that everyone's jaws will drop. Come on, let's start from scratch." They headed to the putting green. Nick explained how to hold the club, demonstrated the stance, and talked about the trajectory of the ball. Sarah tried to listen carefully, but her eyes kept returning to Nick. He spoke with ease, interspersing instructions with jokes, and his energy was somehow magnetic. She found herself thinking that he resembled an actor from an old sports movie, the one who always knew how to lighten the mood. "Okay, let's try this," Nick said, teeing up the ball. "Don't strain yourself. Just pretend you're swatting the ball like it's a pesky fly." Sarah chuckled and took up position. Her first shot was a disaster, the ball flying sideways, barely touching the turf. She looked sheepishly at Nick, expecting criticism, but he just clapped his hands. "That's a great start," he said. "You've got potential. You just need to relax your shoulders a little. Watch." He came closer and gently adjusted her stance, touching her shoulders. His touch was professional, but Sarah felt a slight chill run down her spine. She quickly pushed the thought away. "That's it," Nick said, stepping back. "Now, once more." This time the ball flew further and even in the right direction. Sarah screamed with joy, and Nick nodded approvingly. "I told you, you're a star," he said, winking. The rest of the lesson went on in the same vein. Nick was patient but not boring, and Sarah quickly relaxed. By the end of the hour, she no longer felt like an outsider in this world of perfect lawns and expensive golf clubs. Nick told stories about his students, about how one old lady once hit a ball into a lake and tried to fish it out, and Sarah laughed until she cried. "You're definitely made for this," she said as they walked toward the clubhouse. "You have a talent for making everything fun." "That's because I love my job," Nick replied, looking at her a little longer than necessary. "And when the student is like you, it's doubly pleasant." Sarah felt her cheeks turn slightly pink and quickly changed the subject. "How long have you been working here?" "5 years," he said. "I came from California looking for a quieter place. Oak Grove is just the place. Are you from here?" "Born and raised," Sarah nodded. "True, I'm more into yoga than golf. It was a gift from my husband. He decided it was time for me to try something new." "A good husband," Nick said with a slight smile. "Not everyone would bother with that." "He's the best," Sarah said, her voice full of sincerity. "It's just, he's got a lot of work to do right now. A startup, you know, is like a child who never sleeps." Nick nodded, as if he understood more than she said. "Well, then we'll make sure you don't get bored here. The next lesson is on Wednesday, okay?" "Okay," Sarah agreed. They said goodbye, and Sarah drove home, feeling surprisingly cheerful. She liked the way Nick explained things, and she was already looking forward to her next training session. In the car, she turned on the radio and hummed along to the familiar tune, thinking about how she would tell Daniel about her first lesson. She didn't notice how her thoughts briefly wandered to Nick's smile. At home, Daniel was already waiting for her, sitting on the couch with his laptop. His dark hair was tousled, and there were light shadows under his eyes, a sure sign that he had been working late again. "So, how's the golf star?" he asked, putting the computer down. Sarah plopped down next to him and began to talk, waving her arms. "It was awesome. My coach is Nick, he's like. You know, like an older brother who makes everything fun. I missed a couple of times, of course, but he said I had potential." "Potential, huh?" Daniel chuckled. "Look, you'll be competing in championships soon." "Yeah, dream on," she snorted. "But really, I liked it. Thanks again for that." She kissed him, and he put his arms around her, pulling her closer. "I'm glad you're happy," he said. "Just don't forget about me when you become a golf diva." "Never," Sarah promised, burying her face in his shoulder. They spent the evening over dinner, discussing her lesson and his upcoming trip to Denver. Daniel told her that the investors were almost ready to sign a contract, but they still needed a few more meetings. Sarah listened, nodding, but deep down she felt a twinge of anxiety. She knew how much this project meant to him, but his frequent absences were making her lonely. A golf club, she thought, would be a good distraction. At the next practice, Nick greeted her with the same ease. He showed her how to improve her swing and joked again, making her laugh. When she hit the ball successfully, he clapped her on the shoulder and said, "Now that's what I call it, Sarah. A couple more weeks, and you'll beat me." "Don't flatter yourself," she replied, but her eyes sparkled with praise. They began chatting about life in Oak Grove, local gossip, even the cocktails they served at the club bar. Nick was open and charming, and Sarah found herself enjoying his company. He didn't overdo it, but his compliments about her shape, how quickly she was learning, made her feel special. "You're married to a lucky man," he said casually one day as they drank water after class. "Not every husband is so supportive of his wife's hobby." Sarah smiled, but there was a slight note of sadness in her voice. "Yes, Daniel is like that. It's just, he's all about work now. Sometimes it feels like I'm competing with his computer." Nick looked at her carefully, but said nothing, just nodded. "Well, if anything, there is always a field and me here to cheer you up." She laughed, waving it off. "Don't overdo it, Collins. I came here for golf." "Am I in the way?" he winked. Sarah shook her head and walked to the car, feeling a little warm in her chest. She loved the way Nick could brighten up the day, and she decided it was no big deal. He was just a friendly trainer, and she was a married woman who loved her husband. Everything was under control, she thought, as she started the engine. Caught yourself being interested? Pin it with a like and a subscription so you don't get lost. A comment with a location is a bonus to karma. A warm breeze blew across the fields of Oak Grove when Sarah Miller arrived at the golf club for another visit. It had been 2 weeks since her first lesson, and she was already feeling more confident with a club. Her shots were more accurate, and Nick Collins, her instructor, was constantly praising her progress. Today, she put on her new golf uniform, a white polo, and a navy skirt that she had bought on sale. Looking in the mirror before she went out, Sarah thought she looked good, and this gave her additional confidence. On the practice field, Nick was already waiting for her, leaning against an equipment cart, his dark hair slightly tousled by the wind, and his smile, as always, ready to relieve any tension. "Well, look who we have here," he said, looking her up and down. "A real pro, ready to tear everyone apart today." Sarah rolled her eyes, but couldn't help but smile. "Don't overdo it, Collins. I'm just trying not to hit the ball into the bushes. Modesty is nice, but it's time you admitted you're a star," he winked, holding up his stick. "We're working on long shots today. Come on, I'll show you." They headed toward the outfield, where the balls were already set up. Nick explained how to distribute your weight for a powerful shot, and Sarah listened carefully, trying to remember every detail. Her movements became more fluid, and she herself noticed how golf was beginning to bring her joy. But there was something else in it, a slight, almost imperceptible pleasure in Nick's attention. "Well done, Sarah," he said as her ball flew further than usual. "Look how far. I told you you had talent." "You're just a good teacher," she replied, adjusting the peak of her cap. "Without your jokes, I probably would have given up already." "Jokes are half the battle," Nick grinned. "The other half is your stubbornness. And, you look like you've been playing all your life in that uniform." Sarah felt her cheeks flush slightly and quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the next ball. The compliment was nice, but she reminded herself that Nick probably said that to all his students. It was just his style, to be charming, to keep the mood going. It wasn't personal. They continued their practice, Nick, as usual, interspersing his instructions with stories. He told of the time he had taught golf to a local politician who had nearly broken his club in anger after missing 5 shots in a row. Sarah laughed at the scene, and the lesson flew by. "Listen, you're like my personal comedian," she said as they walked to the clubhouse. "You need to open your own show." "Yeah, an evening with Nick Collins, golf and jokes," he replied, feigning seriousness. "But it's easy with you. You're not one of those people who holds back and is afraid of making a mistake." "That's because you don't give me time to be afraid," Sarah chuckled. "You're always distracting me with your stories." Nick stopped and looked at her with a slight smile. "Well, if I'm distracting you, I can be more serious. But honestly, I like the way you laugh. It's contagious." Sarah paused for a moment, unsure of how to respond. His tone was friendly, but there was a hint of something more in his words. She laughed quickly to lighten the moment. "Okay, stop flattering me. I already think I'm a champion." "You are a champion," he said, but without the joke in his voice. "Seriously, Sarah, you learn quickly, and, well, you're a pleasure to work with." She nodded, trying not to pay attention to his words, and changed the subject. "So, what about the tournament for beginners? You said that the club was planning something like that." Nick perked up and started talking about an upcoming event where newcomers could try their hand. Sarah listened, but her thoughts wandered for a moment. She loved the way Nick brightened her days, the way he noticed her efforts. It wasn't the same attention she got from Daniel, who was immersed in his work. With her husband, things were deeper, more reliable, but his constant business travel left a void that, as it turned out, was easily filled by light conversations with Nick. At home, she told Daniel about the training, leaving out the details of her conversations with Nick. Daniel, sitting at his laptop, listened with half an ear, but still smiled. "Sounds like you're ready to take them down," he said, looking up from the screen. "Maybe I should sign up too. We'll play together." "You, on the field?" Sarah laughed. "You hate sports where you have to aim for a long time." "Hey, I might surprise you," he countered, feigning offense. "But seriously, I'm glad you like it. This Nick, is he a normal guy?" Sarah nodded, trying to sound casual. "Yes, he's normal. Cheerful, knows his stuff. You won't get bored with him." "Okay," Daniel said, returning to his laptop. "The main thing is that it doesn't distract you from your championship plans." Sarah smiled, but a little guilt stirred in her chest. She hadn't done anything wrong, but for some reason she didn't want to tell him how Nick had called her laugh contagious. It was too personal. The following practices only strengthened her bond with Nick. He began to notice little things, the way she wrinkled her nose when she missed a shot, or the way her eyes lit up when the ball went far. Sarah, in turn, found herself responding to his compliments with a little more courage. When he once told her that her new cap makes her look like a model on the cover of a golf magazine, she didn't brush it off. "Well, if I'm a model, then you're my agent. Just don't take a big percentage." Nick laughed, clapping his hands. "Agreed, I'll only take coffee. Make me a latte, and we'll call it even." "Coffee? I can do that," she replied, feeling their conversation becoming more and more casual. She began to notice that she looked forward to practicing not just for the golf, but for these light, almost playful moments with Nick. He was attentive, but not intrusive, and his presence brightened her days. Sarah convinced herself that it was just friendship, that she was in control. She loved Daniel, and the idea of anything more with Nick seemed absurd. But somewhere deep down, she relished the attention she missed at home. One day, after a particularly successful lesson, Nick suggested going to the club bar to celebrate her progress. Sarah hesitated, but agreed after all, it was just juice, no big deal. To your future victories, Nick said, raising his glass of orange juice. To patient coaches, she replied, clinking glasses with him. They chatted about everything from music to the time Nick almost went to Australia to become a surfer to her yoga classes. Sarah noticed that Nick was listening to her with genuine interest, which was nice. When she mentioned that Daniel was back in Denver, Nick leaned in a little closer. "He must be a busy guy," he said. "Aren't you afraid he'll forget what a cool wife he has?" Sarah laughed, but there was a note of tension in her voice. "He won't forget. It's just, that's his job. And I'm here with golf and you, so I don't miss it." "Glad I could help," Nick said, his gaze lingering on her a little longer than necessary. Sarah quickly finished her juice and stood up. "Okay, I have to go. Tomorrow I have yoga classes in the morning. I need to get some sleep." "See you on Wednesday, champion," Nick said, walking her to the exit. In the car, Sarah turned on the radio, but instead of singing, she found herself lost in thought. She loved the way Nick made her feel special, but she knew this was dangerous territory. Denver greeted Daniel Miller with gray skies and downtown bustle. He stepped out of a cab outside a high-rise venture capital firm, clutching the handle of his briefcase. Today was a big day. His cybersecurity software startup had attracted investors, and this meeting could be a turning point. Daniel adjusted his tie, feeling his heartbeat a little faster. He'd been dreaming of this moment for months, and now it all depended on convincing the people at the negotiating table. In the elevator, he checked his phone. A text from Sarah. "You're killing it, my genius. Love you." He smiled, but didn't answer. He didn't want to be distracted. The last few weeks had been stressful. Endless business trips, late nights coding, arguments with partners. Sarah supported him as best she could, but Daniel knew his absence left her alone more often than he'd like. The gift of a membership to the Oak Grove Golf Club was his way of making amends, and from her enthusiastic stories, it seemed to be working. She gushed about how she was improving her swing and how her coach, Nick, made lessons fun. Daniel was glad she was keeping herself occupied, but deep down he felt a little twinge. He didn't have enough time to be with her as often. The conference room on the 15th floor was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Rocky Mountains. There were 3 people at the table, 2 men in suits and a sharp-eyed woman whose name Daniel already knew, Linda Crow. She was the lead investor, and her reputation in Denver venture circles was respectable. "Mr. Miller," Linda began, gesturing to a chair, "we've reviewed your proposal. Tell us why we should invest $1 million in your project." Daniel took a deep breath and began. He talked about his technology, a program that protects corporate networks from the latest cyber attacks by using machine learning to predict vulnerabilities. He showed slides of data, talked about the market potential, and gave examples of how their software had already helped several clients. His voice was confident but not pompous, and his arguments were backed by numbers. He knew what he was doing, and it showed. "You have an ambitious plan," one of the men said, tapping his pen on the table. "But there are plenty of competitors in this niche. What makes you different?" "We don't just protect," Daniel said. "We're ahead. Our algorithm learns faster than others and adapts to threats in real time. It's the difference between a lock on your door and a security guard who knows where a thief is going to go before he does." Linda smiled slightly, but her gaze remained sharp. "What about scaling?" she asked. "$1 million is just the beginning. What's next?" Daniel was prepared for this question. He talked about plans to expand the team, enter the international market, and partner with large corporations. He spoke for about an hour, answering questions, countering doubts, and even cracking jokes when the atmosphere became too tense. By the end of the meeting, he felt like he had done all he could. We'll discuss your proposal, Linda said, standing up. You'll have an answer by the end of the week. Daniel shook everyone's hands, trying not to show his nervousness. As he walked out of the building, he finally exhaled. Her words, by the end of the week, kept running through his head. That meant he had a chance. He pulled out his phone and dialed Sarah. "Hello, champion," she replied, her voice full of energy. "How did it go?" "I think I got them," he said, striding toward a nearby cafe. They weren't jumping for joy, but they didn't kick me out either. That's a victory. Of course I did. You're a genius, Sarah laughed. When are you going home? Tomorrow, he replied. I want to arrange dinner for us. How about La Vista? I'll make reservations. Oh, romance, she teased. I'm all for it. Just remember to turn off your phone, or I know you'll start checking the code over dessert. I promise, Daniel chuckled. How's your golf? Is Nick still making a star out of you? Yeah, he says, I'll be ready for the tournament soon, she replied, and there was a hint of pride in her voice. I hit the hole in one today. Well, almost. Really? Daniel whistled. I'm going to have to take lessons from you soon. They chatted for a few more minutes, and Daniel felt the tension of the day ease away. Sarah's voice always acted as an anchor for him, reminding him of what he was working for. He ended the call with a promise to call back that evening, and went into a cafe to grab a bite to eat before his next meeting. That evening, sitting in his hotel room, he opened his laptop and started checking the code. It was a habit of his even after a long day. He couldn't go to bed without making sure everything worked. But his thoughts kept returning to Sarah. She seemed so happy talking about golf, and it warmed him. He remembered how she'd hugged him on his birthday when she opened the certificate, and how her eyes had sprinkled with joy. Moments like these were what he worked for. I'll have to take a day off when I get back, he muttered, looking at the screen. Go for a walk with her like before. He closed his laptop and lay down, imagining their dinner at La Vista. He wanted to make this evening special, not just because of the possible contract, but to show Sarah that she was his first priority. He'd been leaving her alone too much these past few months, and while she never complained, he knew it wasn't easy for her. The golf club was a good idea, but he wanted to be around more often. The next day, Daniel received an email from Linda Crow. They were ready to sign a contract for $1 million, but with one condition: 40% of the company would go to investors. It was a tough compromise, but Daniel knew that without this money, his startup would not take off. He replied that he agreed and set up a meeting to sign in 3 days. Euphoria washed over him. Years of work, sleepless nights, rejections from other investors had finally paid off. Sarah, you won't believe it, he said, calling her from the airport. They signed. We did it. Oh my God, Daniel, she screamed so loudly that he pulled the phone away from his ear. I knew you'd talk them into it. You're a genius, I told you. I couldn't have done it without your support, he said sincerely. We're celebrating tomorrow. La Vista, 7 o'clock. Put on that dress I love. Red, she giggled. Okay, I will do it. Come quickly, I miss you already. I'll be there soon, he promised, feeling his heart fill with warmth. On the plane, he flipped through the presentation he was showing to investors, but his thoughts were already at home. He imagined Sarah smiling when he told her everything in detail, how they would laugh and make plans for the future. This contract meant not only money, but also stability for both of them. Maybe they would finally be able to buy a bigger house or even go on vacation somewhere. When the plane landed in Oak Grove, Daniel felt on top of the world. He was ready for the next step, both in his work and in his life with Sarah. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow across Oak Grove Golf Club, reflecting off the perfectly manicured lawns. Sarah Miller emerged from the clubhouse, adjusting the bill of her cap. Today's practice was the last one before a short break. Nick Collins had told her he was leaving for a coaching seminar for a couple of days. Sarah was in high spirits. Daniel had called from Denver last night with the news of the deal, and she still couldn't believe that his startup, which he'd been working on for years, was finally taking off. She wanted to do something special for their dinner at La Vista tomorrow, maybe even wear that red dress he loved so much. On the practice field, Nick was already setting up balls, his white polo shirt slightly stuck to his back in the heat. He turned to see Sarah, and a familiar smile lit up his face. "Well, champion, are you ready for one last push before I leave?" he asked, throwing the ball into the air and catching it. "Unless you make me chase balls," Sarah replied, setting her bag down on the grass. "I'm still a yoga teacher, not a marathon runner." "Oh, don't worry. Today we're going to hit, not run," Nick chuckled. "I want you to leave feeling like you can do anything." Sarah chuckled, but her mood was light. The last few weeks with Nick had made golf more than just a hobby. It had become a distraction from the loneliness she felt when Daniel was away. Nick was funny, attentive, and his compliments about her game, her looks, even the way she laughed made her feel better. She told herself it was just friendly conversation, nothing more. She loved Daniel, period. The training began with short punches. Nick stood next to her, correcting her stance, his voice as calm as ever, but with a hint of enthusiasm. "Look, a little lower center of gravity," he said, lightly touching her shoulder. "Like this. Now hit it as if you wanted the ball to fly to the moon." Sarah concentrated and hit the ball. The ball landed softly a few meters from the hole, and she clapped her hands in joy. "Did you see? I almost got it. Almost as cool," Nick said with a wink. "A couple more of these, and I'll start to worry about my job." They continued, moving on to more difficult shots. Nick explained the technique, but as usual, he wove humor into the instructions. When Sarah missed and the ball went wide, he faked a sigh. "Well, Sarah, you clearly want me to go without lunch. This ball is now in Kansas." "Oh, come on," she laughed. "You said it yourself that I'm a star." "A star who likes to keep me on my toes," he replied, his gaze lingering on her a little longer than usual. Sarah felt a slight warmth in her chest, but quickly looked away, focusing on the next ball. She loved the way Nick could make even a miss into a laugh, but his glances and easy compliments were starting to bother her. She reminded herself that he was just like that, friendly, open. It didn't mean anything. By the end of the lesson, Sarah was tired but pleased. She had hit the hole twice, and Nick was generous with his praise. "Seriously, you're making progress faster than I expected," he said as they packed up their equipment. "If this continues, you'll be ready for the rookie tournament by fall." "A tournament?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Let me learn not to lose the ball first, and then we can dream of glory." "Modesty is your thing, isn't it?" Nick chuckled. "But I'm serious. You have something. I don't know, a spark or something." Sarah smiled, but her cheeks were flushed again. She wasn't used to such direct attention, and it was nice, if a little unsettling. They headed toward the parking lot, chatting about their plans for the coming days. Nick mentioned that he was going to a seminar to learn new training techniques, and Sarah told him that she was getting ready for dinner with Daniel. "Sounds like a big night," Nick said as they pulled up to her car. "Your husband must be over the moon about this deal." "Yeah, he is," Sarah nodded, opening the trunk to stow her bag. "I'm just glad he'll be home. The last few months have been, like I'm married to his laptop." She said it as a joke, but there was a hint of sadness in her voice. Nick looked at her carefully, and his tone became softer. "I understand. Work is important, but you deserve to be noticed, Sarah. You're special." Sarah froze, unsure of how to respond. His words were warm, almost intimate, and she felt her pulse quicken. She wanted to laugh it off, but Nick stepped closer, and the distance between them suddenly felt too small. "Nick, she began, but he interrupted. "Look, I don't want to embarrass you," he said, looking into her eyes. "But you're really cool. And honestly, I like spending time with you. More than I do with any of the other students." Sarah opened her mouth to reply, but the words stuck. Her heart was beating faster, and she was suddenly aware of how close he was. Nick leaned in, and before she could do anything, his lips were on hers. It was a light, almost hesitant kiss, but it caught her off guard. For a split second, she gave in, feeling the warmth of his breath, but then her mind took over. "No," she said, pulling away and taking a step back. "Nick, this is wrong. I'm married. I love Daniel." Her voice was shaking, but it was firm. Nick raised his hands in surrender, and his face became serious. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I... I shouldn't have. It's just... I like you. A lot." "It doesn't matter," she snapped, trying not to look him in the eye. "I can't, and I don't want to. You're a good coach, but that's all." She turned to the car, feeling her cheeks burn. Nick tried to say something, but she raised her hand. "Please, don't. Let's just forget that it happened." "Okay," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to offend you. If you want, I can transfer you to another coach." Sarah shook her head as she opened the door. "No, it's okay. Just, don't do that again. See you after your seminar." She got into the car and slammed the door without looking at him. Nick stood there until she drove away, and only then did she allow herself to exhale. Her hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel. A whirlwind of thoughts swirled in her head. How had this even happened? Why hadn't she stopped him right away? And most importantly, what was she going to say to Daniel now? At home, she dropped her bag in the hallway and stepped into the shower, as if the water could wash away her confusion. Standing under the hot stream, she tried to sort out her feelings. She hadn't wanted this kiss, but why had she given in, even for a second? Nick was charming, his attentions were flattering, but she'd never thought it would go this far. She loved Daniel, that was undeniable. But the loneliness of the last few months, his endless business trips, they had left her vulnerable. "It was a mistake," she said to her reflection in the foggy mirror. "Just a mistake. I'll fix it." She decided she wasn't going to let Nick cross her boundaries again. If he started flirting again, she'd make it clear that it wasn't okay. She'd also consider whether she should continue training with him. Maybe a different trainer wouldn't be such a bad idea. But she had to keep telling Daniel. It would only upset him, and she didn't want to ruin his success. Besides, nothing serious had happened. It was just a moment of weakness that she'd already stopped. Sarah came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, and picked up her phone. A text from Daniel. "Already at the airport. Tomorrow at 7. Don't be late, my love." She smiled, feeling the warmth spreading in her chest. Tomorrow they will be together, and everything will be as before. She will write to Nick to confirm the next training, but she will do it formally, without any hints of friendship. Everything will be under control. She went to bed, but she couldn't sleep. In the darkness, she thought about how close she had come to the edge, and promised herself she wouldn't let Daniel down again. She didn't know that this moment of weakness was already captured on someone else's phone and would soon change her life. It was a warm, cloudless afternoon in Oak Grove, perfect for a round of golf or a stroll, but Mike Reed, the 32-year-old owner of a local auto repair shop, was at Oak Grove Golf Club for a different reason. An old friend of his, Daniel Miller, had asked him to stop by the clubhouse to pick up some paperwork that Sarah had left in the front office after her last practice. Mike, as usual, hadn't refused. He was the kind of guy who was always willing to help, especially when it came to Daniel, a high school friend. But as Mike parked his truck outside the door, he had no idea he was about to witness a scene that would change his friend's life. He got out of the car, adjusting his baseball cap, and headed toward the main building of the club. The lobby was cool, smelling of freshly brewed coffee and wood floor wax. The receptionist, the same smiling girl who had greeted Sarah the week before, quickly found a folder of paperwork, some membership forms that Sarah had forgotten to sign. Mike thanked her and was about to leave when his gaze fell on the parking lot through a large window. There, standing by a black hatchback that he recognized immediately as Sarah's, was Sarah talking to a man. Mike squinted, trying to make out who it was. He was tall, wearing a white polo shirt, with a confident stance, clearly not a random passerby. They were standing close, too close, and Mike felt something stir in his chest. He'd known Sarah since she'd started dating Daniel, and he'd always thought she was a good wife. But what he saw didn't look right. "Shit," he muttered, pulling out his phone. He wasn't one for gossip, but this was different. If something was going on, Daniel needed to know. Mike turned on his camera and took a couple of shots, trying to be inconspicuous. In the first, Sarah and the man he could now see that it was probably the trainer she had mentioned were face to face, their poses almost intimate. In the second, the man leaned in and their lips touched. Mike froze, feeling the blood rush to his face. He took another shot, catching the moment when Sarah pulled away, but it didn't change the point. She was kissing someone else. "What the fuck, Sarah?" he whispered, looking at the screen of his phone. His fingers shook as he scrolled through the pictures. He didn't want to believe his eyes, but the evidence was right in front of him. Mike walked back to the car, still holding the phone. He got behind the wheel, but didn't start the engine, trying to collect his thoughts. Sarah was gone, and the man, the coach, by the looks of it, was walking back toward the field. Mike knew he had to do something, but what? Should he tell Daniel, or talk to Sarah first? He respected her, but Daniel was his best friend, almost like a brother. Mike remembered how Daniel had helped him pay off his car repair debt, how he'd always been there when life threw him curveballs. He couldn't just stay silent. "Shit, shit, shit," he muttered, opening the messenger. He selected the chat with Daniel and began typing. "Bro, I was at the club, picking up some papers for Sarah. Saw something. You should know." He attached 3 pictures and hesitated for a second before hitting send. His stomach clenched, as if he'd just betrayed someone, but he knew it was the right thing to do. Daniel deserved the truth. Mike started the car and drove back to the garage, but his thoughts wouldn't let go. He knew Sarah as a fun, kind woman who adored Daniel. She and Mike's wife, Kelly, often joked that Sarah and Daniel were the perfect couple, the kind who would live to see their golden wedding anniversary. But what he saw didn't make sense. Was it a mistake? Had her coach forced her into it? But then why hadn't she pushed him away right away? The questions swirled around in his head, and Mike decided he'd confront Daniel in person when he got back. Meanwhile, in Denver, Daniel had just left the airport, heading to the rental car counter. His phone vibrated, and he opened his messenger, expecting a text from Sarah. He frowned when he saw Mike's name. Mike rarely texted without a reason. After reading the message and opening the photos, Daniel froze in the middle of the terminal. On the screen was Sarah, his Sarah, in a man's arms. The next photo was of them kissing. The third photo showed her pulling away, but it didn't matter. His heart sank, as if someone had punched him in the chest. "No," he muttered, flipping through the pictures again. "This can't be true." He leaned against the wall, feeling the blood pounding in his temples. People were passing by, but for him the world was reduced to the screen of his phone. He tried calling Mike, but he didn't answer, probably driving. Daniel texted, "Are you sure it's her? When was this?" The answer came a minute later. "Today, about 20 minutes ago. This is her car, her uniform. Bro, I'm shocked. Sorry I had to send you this." Daniel closed his eyes, trying to breathe evenly. His joy at the signed contract, his dinner plans with Sarah, everything that had seemed so important an hour ago, was in tatters. He felt the anger and pain mingling inside him, but he didn't know what to do with it yet. He didn't want to believe that Sarah, his wife, the woman he loved more than anything in the world, could betray him. But the pictures didn't lie. "Okay," he said to himself, clutching the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I'll figure it out." He got into his rental car and drove home, his thoughts racing. He remembered Sarah talking about Nick, her coach, with such enthusiasm. "He's fun, he knows his stuff," she'd said. Daniel had dismissed it, thinking it was just her joy in golf. Now, every word she said sounded like a lie. He replayed their conversations in his head, trying to find signs he'd missed. Was she too fun? Did she mention Nick too much? "Shit," he cursed, slamming his hand on the steering wheel. He didn't want to be the guy who suspected his wife for no reason, but Mike's pictures weren't just any old thing. They were proof. At home, he dropped his bag in the hallway and went into the kitchen, where he poured himself some water. Sarah was supposed to be at yoga class, and he was glad she wasn't there. He didn't know how he would look her in the eye, didn't know what he would say. He opened the pictures again, zooming in, studying every detail. The man in the photo was Nick, he was sure of it. His posture, his clothes, everything matched the way Sarah had described her trainer. Daniel sat down at his desk and texted Mike, "Thanks for showing me. Don't tell anyone, not even Kelly. I'll handle it myself. Did you see anything else?" Mike responded quickly, "Just that." They talked for a few seconds after she pulled away, and then she drove off. "I didn't bother approaching. If anything happens, I'm here, bro." Daniel nodded, though Mike couldn't see it. He appreciated the support, but he needed time to think about it. He'd canceled his reservation at La Vista. A romantic dinner now seemed like a joke. He didn't know how to handle Sarah when she got back. Part of him wanted to storm into her yoga studio and make a scene, but another, more part of him reminded him that he needed to hear her out. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this wasn't what it seemed. But as he sat in the quiet of the kitchen, staring at his phone, his mind conjured up worst-case scenarios. He remembered Sarah hugging him on his birthday, promising that the golf club wouldn't take her away from him. He trusted her, always had, and now that trust was cracking at the seams. Mike, meanwhile, was back at the body shop, but he couldn't concentrate on his work. He could still see Sarah and the guy in the parking lot, and it was bothering him. He didn't want to ruin Daniel's life, but he couldn't keep quiet. He hoped Daniel would handle it quietly, but deep down he knew that these things rarely ended quietly. The plane that carried Daniel Miller from Denver to Oak Grove seemed interminable slow, even though the flight was only an hour long. He sat by the window, but he wasn't looking at the passing clouds. His eyes were glued to the screen of his phone, where the pictures Mike had sent him were still open. Sarah, his Sarah, in some man's arms, kissing him, then pulling away, but too late. Every time he scrolled through the pictures, his chest tightened with pain, a lump in his throat. Daniel clenched his fists, trying to keep himself under control. He didn't want to cause a scene on the plane, but anger was bubbling inside him like boiling water ready to spill. He closed his eyes, trying to breathe evenly. Maybe there is an explanation, he kept telling himself, but the pictures were too telling. He had known Sarah for 5 years, 3 of which they had been married to, and he had never doubted her faithfulness. She had been his rock, his best friend, the person he had worked his ass off for. And now this. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and worst of all, a fool for not noticing his marriage was falling apart. When the plane landed, Daniel took a cab home. On the way, he tried to formulate a plan. He didn't want to jump Sarah with accusations, but he couldn't pretend it hadn't happened either. He needed to hear her side of the story, even though part of him no longer believed she could explain the photos. He'd canceled his reservation at La Vista at the airport. The romantic dinner he'd planned to celebrate the contract now seemed ridiculous. Instead, he'd wait for Sarah to get home and talk, calmly, or at least try. The house greeted him with silence. Sarah hadn't returned from yoga yet, which gave him time to collect his thoughts. He dropped his bag in the hallway, walked into the kitchen, and opened the fridge, but instead of a beer, he grabbed a bottle of water. Alcohol would only add fuel to the fire right now. He sat down at the table, placing his phone in front of him, and opened the pictures again. In the first, Sarah was standing close to Nick, her hand on his shoulder. In the second, their lips were touching. In the third, she was pulling away, but her face, it didn't look angry. Daniel gritted his teeth, feeling the anger rising again. "How could you?" he muttered, looking at her smile in the photo. It was the same smile she'd given him when they'd first started dating, and now she was giving it to someone else. He heard the sound of a car pulling up and stood up to greet Sarah. When she walked in, her face lit up with joy. She dropped her gym bag on the floor and ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "You're home," she exclaimed, kissing him on the cheek. "I've been waiting for you. How was the flight? Tell me all about the contract." Daniel tensed but didn't pull away. Her joy seemed genuine, which only confused him more. How could she be so happy when she'd been kissing someone else just hours ago? He gently pushed her away, trying to keep his voice even. "The flight is normal," he said, sitting back down at the table. The contract was signed. Everything is according to plan. Sarah frowned, noticing his tone. Hey, are you okay? You look, I don't know, tired. Is it because of work? Daniel looked at her, trying to find a hint of guilt in her eyes. But she looked the same as always, open, caring. This angered him even more. He took out his phone, opened the gallery, and silently placed it on the table, screen facing her. I want you to see, he said, his voice cold as ice. Sarah picked up the phone, and her smile slowly faded. She scrolled through the pictures, and her eyes widened in shock. She opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything right away. Daniel looked at her, waiting for an explanation, but inside he was seething. It's not what you think, she finally breathed, her voice shaking. Daniel, please let me explain. Explain? He raised his voice, unable to contain himself any longer. Explain why you're kissing that guy. Your trainer? Are you serious, Sarah? It wasn't me, she said, her eyes filling with tears. He kissed me, I didn't want to. I pushed him away, I swear. Pushed away, Daniel stood up, anger rising. In these pictures, you don't look like you're pushing away. You look like you're enjoying it. Sarah jumped up, her hands shaking. No, it's not true. Yes, we flirted, it was stupid, but I never wanted anything more. He kissed me, and I stopped him right away. I told him that I loved you, that I was married. Please believe me. Daniel shook his head, his face stony. Flirting? Are you serious? I work hard in Denver so we can have a normal life, and you flirt with some coach. That's all you can say? That it was stupid? I didn't cheat on you, Sarah said, her voice breaking. It was just for a moment. I didn't expect him to do that. I've already decided I'm not going to do anything with him anymore. I don't want to see him. Daniel looked at her, a mixture of pain and disbelief in his eyes. He wanted to believe her, but the pictures burned him like hot metal. He remembered her talking about Nick, his jokes, how he made her workouts fun. Now it all seemed like a lie, a disguise for something bigger. Who took this? Sarah asked, wiping away tears. Where are these photos from? Mike, Daniel said, not looking away. He was at the club, picking up your papers. He saw you. And I'm glad he did. Otherwise, I'd still be the idiot who thinks he has the perfect wife. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Mike? Oh my God. Daniel, it's not like that. I'm not like that. What are you, Sarah? He asked, his voice quieter, but only harsher. Because right now I see a woman who kissed another man behind my back, and it wasn't just a kiss. You let it happen. You let him get that close. Sarah began to cry, hanging her head. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have flirted. I shouldn't have let him get to me. But I stopped it, I swear. I love you, Daniel. You have to believe me. He was silent, looking at her. Part of him wanted to hug her, to tell her everything would be okay, but the other part of him, the part that had seen these pictures, couldn't. He felt betrayed, and that feeling was stronger than her tears. I don't know how to trust you, he said finally. I thought we were perfect. And now I don't know who you are. Sarah took a step towards him, but he raised his hand, stopping her. No need. I can't now. I'm going back to Denver. For a month. I need time to figure out if I want to continue this marriage. A month. Sarah choked. Daniel, please don't go. Let's talk. I'll explain everything. We've already talked, he snapped. And I don't want to hear any more excuses. You can do whatever you want for this month. Date this Nick guy if you want. Flirt with whoever you want. I won't control you. And I'll be free, too. Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't want anyone else. I want you. Please don't do this. But Daniel had already taken the keys and was heading for the door. He stopped at the threshold without turning around. I'll call when I'm ready to talk. Don't wait for me today. He walked out, leaving Sarah alone in the kitchen. She sank into a chair, hugged herself, and began to cry. Her world, so stable and happy that morning, was crumbling, and she knew it was her fault. She didn't know how to fix it, but she was sure of one thing. She didn't want to lose Daniel. Not now, not ever. The silence in the Miller house was almost palpable as Sarah stood alone in the kitchen, still clutching Daniel's phone. The screen had gone blank, but the images of those pictures her and Nick in the parking lot were still in her mind. Her heart was pounding, and the tears she'd been trying to hold back were streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't believe it had come this far. She'd been planning a romantic dinner with Daniel this morning, looking forward to him telling her about the contract, and now he was leaving, slamming the door, and her world was crumbling. Sarah stood up, wiped her face with her sleeve, and tried to collect her thoughts. She had to do something to get him back, but how? She walked into the living room, where everything reminded her of her life with Daniel. The photos on the mantel, his favorite chair, the blanket they shared where they watched movies. It all seemed so far away now. She picked up her phone and dialed her sister Lisa's number, but hung up when she didn't answer. Lisa was strict, and Sarah knew she was going to get a lecture about how she'd screwed everything up. Instead, she texted, "Lisa, I need your help. Call me when you can." Sarah sank down on the couch, hugging her knees. Her thoughts were a mess. She hadn't cheated on Daniel, not exactly, but she knew her flirtation with Nick had been a mistake. She'd let him get too close, allowing herself to enjoy his attention, and now she was paying for it. She remembered his kiss brief, unexpected, but one she'd given in to, if only for a moment. It was her fault, and she knew Daniel had a right to be angry. "How could I have been such an idiot?" she muttered, burying her face in her hands. Meanwhile, Daniel was driving down the highway, heading toward Mike's house. His hands were tight on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so hard his teeth were grinding. He could still see Sarah standing in the kitchen, her tears, her pleas. Part of him wanted to go back, to hold her, to believe that it had all just been a mistake. But Mike's pictures burned inside him like poison. He couldn't get her face out of his head, the face he loved, but which now seemed alien. He parked at Mike's house, a small cottage on the edge of Oak Grove. Mike was already waiting for him on the porch, beer in hand. His face was serious, without his usual smirk. "Bro, how are you?" Mike asked as Daniel approached. "Like I got run over by a truck," Daniel said, sitting down on the steps. "Give me a beer." Mike handed him the bottle, and they sat in silence for a couple of minutes, watching the sunset. Finally, Mike spoke. "I'm sorry I had to show you this. I didn't know what to do myself, but you had to know." "You did the right thing," Daniel said, taking a sip. "Better than being a blind idiot." "Did she explain anything?" Mike asked cautiously. Daniel chuckled as he looked at the bottle. "She said he kissed her, that she pushed him away, that it was a mistake and she didn't mean to. But shit, Mike, she admitted she was flirting with him. Flirting, while I'm in Denver working my ass off, she's out there, playing her games." Mike shook his head, his face turning grim. "That's shit, bro. But, you know Sarah, she's not the type to cheat left and right. Maybe it really was just stupid." "Stupid," Daniel raised his voice, but then stopped, trying to control himself. "Mike, I gave her this membership to make her happy. I worked like hell so we could have a future. And she let some coach kiss her. And you're saying this is just stupid." Mike raised his hands in surrender. "I'm not making excuses for her, dude. Just, maybe give her a chance to explain herself. You two have always been one. Don't rush to break everything." Daniel was silent, looking at the horizon. He knew Mike was right. He and Sarah were a team. But now he couldn't think of her without pain. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her with Nick, and it was like a knife in his heart. "I told her I was going to Denver for a month," he said finally. "I need time. I don't know if I can forgive her. I don't know if I want to." "A month is a long time," Mike said. "Are you sure?" "No," Daniel answered honestly. "But I can't be with her now. I can't look at her without thinking about those photos." Mike nodded without insisting. They finished their beers and Daniel decided to stay the night at his friend's. He didn't want to go home where everything reminded him of Sarah. Mike offered him the couch in the living room and Daniel agreed, even though he knew he wouldn't sleep. Meanwhile, Sarah was sitting on the couch when Lisa called back. Her voice was stern, but with a hint of concern. Sarah, what happened? You wrote about some kind of disaster. Sarah sobbed, trying to collect herself. Lisa, I ruined everything. Daniel thinks I'm cheating on him. He saw a photo of me, of my coach kissing me. I didn't cheat, I swear, but he doesn't believe me. Wait, Lisa interrupted. What coach? What photo? Tell me from the beginning. Sarah, swallowing tears, told everything. About training with Nick, about his flirting, about the kiss she interrupted, about the pictures Mike took. Lisa listened silently, and Sarah felt her sister becoming more and more tense with each word. Sarah, are you serious? Lisa said when she finished. You let some guy flirt with you, and then kiss you, and you're surprised Daniel is furious? I didn't mean to, Sarah cried. It was a mistake. I stopped him. I love Daniel, Lisa. I don't want to lose him. Then why did you let this happen in the first place? Lisa raised her voice. You're married, Sarah. You can't just flirt for fun. Do you even realize how that looks? Sarah closed her eyes, feeling her sister's words hit a sore spot. I know I screwed up. But what should I do? He left and said he was going away for a month. I don't know how to get him back. Lisa sighed and her tone became softer. First, stop making excuses. You're guilty and you need to admit it. Not to me, but to him. If you want to save the marriage, you'll have to prove that you're serious. But Sarah, it won't be easy. He feels betrayed and it won't just go away. I'll do anything, Sarah said, her voice shaking. Lisa, I can't lose him. He's everything to me. Then start with honesty, Lisa replied, and never put yourself in such situations again. I'll come tomorrow, we'll talk. In the meantime, try to get some sleep, and don't call him now, give him time. Sarah nodded, even though Lisa couldn't see her, and ended the call. She lay down on the couch, clutching a pillow, and cried. She knew Lisa was right, she'd let Nick go too far, and now she was paying for it. Her mind raced between her fear of losing Daniel and her determination to fix everything. She didn't know how to regain his trust, but she was willing to try anything. Daniel lay on Mike's couch, staring at the ceiling. He still had his phone open with the pictures. He didn't know what he would do in a month, but he was sure of one thing. He couldn't forgive Sarah that easily. His love for her was still alive, but the pain of what she had done was greater. He closed his eyes, hoping that the morning would bring some clarity, but deep down he knew that this month would change everything. Morning light filtered through the curtains of Mike's living room, where Daniel Miller had spent the night on the uncomfortable couch. His back arched and his head was pounding from lack of sleep and the conversation with Sarah the night before. He lay staring at the ceiling, still clutching his phone, where the pictures Mike had sent him were open. Those pictures of Sarah in Nick's arms, of their kiss, burned him inside like an open wound. He had been awake most of the night, replaying her words in his head. It was a mistake. I stopped him. I love you. He wanted to believe it, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the picture, a face that didn't look so innocent. Daniel sat up, rubbing his temples. Mike was already in the kitchen, clinking dishes and brewing coffee. The smell of freshly brewed coffee brought Daniel back to his senses a little. He stood up, stretched, and walked over to his friend, who silently placed a mug in front of him. You look like you've been run over by a truck, Mike said, sitting down across from him. Have you been getting any sleep? An hour, maybe, Daniel muttered, taking a sip. I can't turn my head off. Mike nodded, looking into his mug. I understand. Listen, I didn't want to butt in yesterday, but are you really leaving for a month? Yeah, Daniel said, his voice firm but tired. I need time. I can't be with her right now, Mike. Every time I look at her, I see those damn pictures. Okay, Mike said, tapping his fingers on the table. But bro, are you sure you don't want to talk to her again? Maybe she really did screw up and she's sorry. Daniel shook his head, his face hardening. She admitted she flirted with him. She did, Mike. While I'm in Denver, busting my ass so we can have a future, she's out there, playing with that coach. And even if the kiss was his idea, she let it happen. How can I trust her after that? Mike shrugged without arguing. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just, you and Sarah have always been a team. Maybe we should give her a chance. I gave her a chance yesterday, Daniel snapped. She swore it was nothing serious, but I can't just forget. Not now. I need space to figure out if I want to continue. Mike nodded, knowing there was no point in arguing. He stood up to pour more coffee and threw over his shoulder. If anything, my sofa is always at your disposal. But, a month is a long time. Don't delay the decision. I won't delay, Daniel replied, but there was no confidence in his voice. He pulled out his phone and booked a return ticket to Denver for the evening. His contract with investors required his presence, and this was a convenient excuse to leave. He didn't want to see Sarah, didn't want to hear her excuses. Not now. He wrote her a short text. Leaving today, a month without contact, like I said. Don't call. He hit send and turned off the phone, feeling his insides tighten. Meanwhile, back at their house in Oak Grove, Sarah woke up with a heavy head and puffy eyes. She had barely slept, replaying the conversation with Daniel the night before. His cold voice, his eyes full of pain and anger, haunted her. She knew it was her fault, but she couldn't bear the thought of him leaving. She got up, threw on a robe, and went down to the kitchen, where his empty water cup still lay. This small trace of his presence made her heart clench. She picked up the phone, hoping for a message, but all she saw was his last one. Leaving today. No contact for a month, like I said. Don't call. The words hit her like a slap. She sank into a chair, feeling the tears welling up again. She didn't want to lose him, but she didn't know how to stop her. She dialed Lisa, her sister, and this time she got an answer. Sarah? Lisa's voice was sleepy but worried. What happened? You wrote yesterday, but I was at a meeting. Lisa, he's leaving, Sarah blurted out, her voice breaking. Daniel. He saw a picture of me, of my coach kissing me. He thinks I'm cheating on him. I've tried to explain, but he doesn't believe me. He said he's going away for a month, and I don't know what to do. Lisa was silent for a second, digesting what she had heard. Wait, Sarah, you kissed the coach? Seriously? It's not what it sounds like, Sarah said quickly. He kissed me. I didn't mean to. I pushed him away, I swear. But, yeah, I flirted with him. It was stupid, I know. And now Daniel thinks I'm cheating on him. Oh, Sarah, Lisa sighed, her tone becoming stern. Did you really think you could flirt with another guy and not have consequences? You're married, for fuck's sake. I know, Sarah began to cry. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I love Daniel. I was lonely. He was always in Denver, and he was just sweet. It's not an excuse, I know, but I didn't cheat on him, Lisa. It was one kiss, and I stopped him. Okay, Lisa said. But do you realize what this looks like to Daniel? He saw a photo of his wife kissing another man, and you admitted to flirting. It's a betrayal, Sarah, even if you don't go any further. Sarah sniffled, wiping away her tears. I know, I messed everything up. But what should I do? He said he didn't want to talk for a month. I can't wait that long, Lisa. I'm afraid he won't come back. Lisa was silent for a moment, and then her voice became softer. Look, there's nothing you can do right now except give him time. He's angry, he's hurt. If you push him now, it'll only get worse. But you need to show that you're serious. No more coaching, no more flirting. And Sarah, you need to be honest with yourself. Why did you let this happen in the first place? Sarah clutched the phone, her voice shaking. I don't know. I liked the way he looked at me. It was stupid, I know. But I never wanted him, Lisa. I want Daniel. Only him. Then prove it, Lisa said. Not with words, but with actions. Stop studying with this Nick. Focus on yourself and how to regain his trust. I'll come over this evening. We'll talk normally. But Sarah, you need to understand what you've done. This isn't just a mistake. You hurt someone who loves you. I know, Sarah whispered. Thank you, Lisa. She ended the call and stared into space, her mind racing between fear and determination. She knew she had to do something to get Daniel back, but his words about a month apart scared her. What if he decided he didn't want her anymore? What if he found someone else? She pushed the thoughts away, but they kept coming back. In Denver, Daniel was already at the airport, waiting for his flight. He had booked a small apartment near his investor's office, so he could fully immerse himself in his work. His startup needed his attention, and he hoped that the code and the meetings would distract him from the pain. He didn't know what would happen in a month, but now he needed distance. He didn't want to see Sarah, didn't want to hear her voice. He sat on the plane, looking out the window. His thoughts were of Sarah, of the way she had looked yesterday when she had tried to explain. He wanted to believe her, but he couldn't. Not now. He decided that a month would give him clarity. Either he would find a way to forgive her, or he would realize that their marriage was over. He closed his eyes, hoping that Denver would help him forget, at least for a while. Sarah, meanwhile, was sitting in the kitchen when Lisa arrived. She hugged her sister, and the tears started flowing again. Lisa didn't console her right away, but simply sat down next to her and said, "Tell me everything again, and without excuses. If you want to save your marriage, you need to be honest." Sarah nodded, wiping away her tears, and began to speak. She knew it would be a long conversation, but she was ready for it. She wanted Daniel back, and she was willing to do anything to get it. Denver greeted Daniel Miller with a gray dawn and the sounds of the early city. He got out of a cab outside the small downtown apartment complex where he'd rented an apartment for the month. His suitcase was light, just a few changes of clothes and his laptop, but the weight in his chest made every step feel heavy. It had been a week since he'd left Oak Grove, leaving Sarah in tears, and the images of Mike still haunted him. He hadn't turned on his phone since sending that last text asking her not to call. He needed to focus on work, on his startup, on anything that would take his mind off her betrayal. The apartment was modest. One bedroom, a small kitchen, and a couch that looked like it had outlived more than one tenant. Daniel dropped his bag on the floor and immediately opened his laptop. His startup, now backed by $1 million contract, required his full commitment. Investors were waiting for the first results, and he knew he couldn't let them down. He connected to the Wi-Fi, opened the code, and dove into work, trying to drown out thoughts of Sarah. His team's office was a 10-minute walk away, in a modern building with large windows and an open space that was bustling with activity. His colleagues, 5 developers and 2 designers, were already there when he walked in. The atmosphere was tense but energetic. Everyone knew that the contract with Linda Crow was their chance. Daniel greeted the team and immediately got down to business, discussing the architecture of a new module for their program. "We need to speed up testing," he said, standing at the board with a marker. "If we want to get to market by the fall, we have no room for error." "I agree," nodded Travis, the lead developer, a guy in his mid-20s with a tattoo on his forearm. "But we need another person on the UI. The interface is still raw, and clients will look at it first." "I already talked to Linda," Daniel replied. "She found a designer. She's coming to the meeting today. Her name is Abby, and she seems to be local." Travis chuckled but said nothing, turning back to his laptop. Daniel felt a little relieved. Work was his sanctuary. Here, he could control everything: the code, the bugs, the deadlines. Unlike his marriage, where he didn't know how to sort out the chaos in his head. Around lunchtime, Abby walked into the office. She was a young woman in her mid-20s, with short dark hair and a bright smile. She was wearing jeans and a light shirt, with a backpack slung over her shoulder, and she immediately exuded energy. Linda introduced her to the team, and Abby immediately jumped into the discussion, showing off her interface sketches. "I thought we needed more minimalism," she said, opening the tablet. "Users don't want to dig through complicated menus. Look, I simplified the navigation." Daniel looked at her sketches and nodded. "Not bad. But what about mobile adaptation? Customers will use it on phones." "Already in the works," Abby replied, scrolling down the screen. "Here's a prototype. Give me a few days, and I'll show you a working version." Her confidence impressed Daniel. She spoke quickly but clearly, and her ideas were fresh. By the end of the meeting, he found himself smiling for the first time in a week. Abby was not only professional, but also a good lighthearted person. Her jokes about laggy designers and coders who write comments like poetry made even Travis chuckle. After the meeting, Abby approached Daniel while he was pouring coffee in the break room. "So you're the brains of this whole operation?" she asked, crossing her arms and smiling slightly. "Not really," he replied with a shrug. "Just a guy trying not to sink a ship." Modestly, she chuckled. "Linda says you're a genius, and geniuses usually don't admit so easily that they can drown something." Daniel chuckled, but his smile was forced. "Linda is exaggerating. I'm just doing my job." Abby looked at him more closely, as if noticing his mood. "Rough day?" she asked, tilting her head. "It's been a tough week," he replied without going into details. "I understand," she nodded. "When I'm stressed, I go to the bar across the street. They make great bourbon there. If you want, join me. I'll buy you one." Daniel shook his head, but her offer unexpectedly warmed him. "Thanks, but I'm currently swamped with code. Maybe another time." "I keep my word," Abby winked and went to her desk. Daniel spent the rest of the day glued to his laptop, but thoughts of Sarah kept popping up. He imagined her back in Oak Grove in their house and wondered what she was doing. Was she texting Nick? Was she dating him already? He pushed the thoughts away, but they kept coming back like pesky flies. Abby, with her easygoing energy, was a welcome distraction, but he wouldn't let himself think of her as anything more. He was still married, and despite the pain, he didn't want to sink to the level he was accusing Sarah of. By the end of the week, the team had made its first progress. The interface prototype Abby had designed had received Linda's approval. After another meeting, she suggested that they all go to that bar across the street to celebrate. Daniel initially declined, but Travis insisted. "Come on, boss," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "One cocktail won't kill you. We all need to relax." Daniel reluctantly agreed. The bar was noisy but cozy, with wooden tables, dim lighting, and the smell of fried chicken wings. Abby ordered bourbon for everyone, and soon the conversation turned from work to real-life stories. Travis told her about the time he got stuck in an elevator with a client, and Abby shared the time she accidentally spilled coffee on a professor's laptop in college. "And he still gave me an A," she finished, laughing. "He probably felt sorry for me." "Or maybe you're just a good talker," Daniel said, his voice unexpectedly light. Abby looked at him, narrowing her eyes. "Oh, is that a compliment? From Mr. Seriousness?" "Don't get used to it," he replied, but the corners of his lips twitched. By the end of the evening, he felt the tension ease a little. Abby was smart, witty, and her presence made his day a little less stressful. But he kept his distance, reminding himself that he wasn't here to make friends or anything more. He was married, and despite everything that had happened, he wasn't going to compromise his principles. When he got back to his apartment, his phone flashed with a new message. It was Sarah. "Daniel, please talk to me. I know it's my fault, but I love you. Give me a chance." He looked at the screen, feeling the anger and hurt rise again. He texted back, "I said a month. Don't text." Then he turned off the phone and lay down on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know what would happen next, but right now he needed to focus on work and on himself. Abby, meanwhile, back home, thought about Daniel. She noticed his reserve, but also saw how he came alive when he talked about his project. She liked his sense of humor beneath his seriousness and hoped he would open up more. She didn't know about his problems with Sarah, but she sensed that there was something personal behind his reserve. She decided she would be there if he wanted to talk, but she wouldn't push it. Daniel lay in the dark, thinking about how much his life had changed in a week. He still loved Sarah, but her actions had left a hole in his heart that he didn't know how to mend. His job was his salvation, and he decided that the next few weeks would be dedicated to it alone. The silence in the Miller's house in Oak Grove was deafening. Sarah sat on a kitchen chair, staring at the empty coffee mug she hadn't washed since the night before. It had been a week since Daniel had left for Denver, leaving her with a short message, "No contact for a month. Don't text." His words echoed in her head, and every time she thought about their last conversation, her heart sank with pain. She knew she was guilty, and that guilt was like a heavy stone she carried with her every minute. Sarah stood up to pour herself a glass of water, but instead went to the window, looking out at their small yard. The spring flowers she and Daniel had planted together last summer were beginning to bloom, but their brightness only made her sadder. She remembered how they had laughed as they dug in the soil, how he had teased her for planting the tulips crookedly. It had all seemed so simple then, so right, and now she has ruined it all because of her stupidity. Her phone was on the table, and she resisted the urge to text Daniel. She'd already sent one message, begging him to talk, but all she'd gotten in return was a cold reminder of a month apart. She knew he meant it. Daniel always kept his word, especially when he was angry, and he had every right to. She'd let Nick Collins, her golf coach, go too far, and now she was paying the price. Sarah returned to her desk and opened her laptop. She wrote an email to the Oak Grove Golf Club, formally withdrawing from Nick's training. "Due to personal reasons, I will not be able to continue my lessons. Please transfer my lessons to another coach or cancel them." She hit send and exhaled, feeling as if some weight had been lifted. It was a first step, but she knew it wasn't enough. She needed to prove to Daniel that she was serious, that she wanted to earn his trust back. The doorbell rang, and Sarah jumped. She opened the door to find Lisa, her older sister, holding a bag from the local bakery. Lisa, a tall woman with dark hair and a direct gaze, looked like someone who always knew what to do. But today her face was serious, almost stern. "You look terrible," Lisa said, coming in and putting the bag on the table. "When was the last time you ate?" "I don't know," Sarah answered honestly, sitting down. "Yesterday, probably." Lisa shook her head and took out croissants and coffee in paper cups from the bag. "Eat," she commanded, pushing the food towards me. "And tell me, what's going on? You called yesterday, but I was in a meeting, and judging by the look on your face, things are bad." Sarah took the croissant but didn't eat it, just looked at it as if it could give her answers. "Daniel left," she began, her voice shaking. "He saw a picture of me kissing Nick, my trainer. It was Mike, his friend. He was at the club, and he took the whole thing. Daniel thinks I'm cheating on him. I tried to explain that it was a mistake, that I stopped Nick, but he doesn't believe me. He said he was going to Denver for a month, and I shouldn't get involved with him." Lisa leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Sarah, are you serious? You kissed another guy, and you're surprised he's furious." "I didn't kiss," Sarah said, but her voice was weak. "I mean, he kissed me. I gave in for a second, but then I pushed him away. I told him I loved Daniel, that I was married. It was a mistake, Lisa. I didn't mean it." "Mistake?" Lisa raised her voice, her eyes narrowed. "Sarah, you are married. You can't just make a mistake with another man. You let him flirt with you, let him get so close that he decided to kiss you. That's not just a mistake, that's betrayal." Sarah hung her head, tears streaming down her cheeks again. "I know. I was an idiot. I was lonely. Daniel was always in Denver, and Nick, he was just sweet. He made me laugh, and I thought it was innocent. But I never wanted anything more. I love Daniel, Lisa. I can't lose him." Lisa sighed, her tone becoming a little softer, but still stern. "Look, I know you were lonely, but that's no excuse. You hurt him, Sarah. And not just hurt him, you made him doubt you, your marriage. Do you have any idea how he feels right now?" "I can imagine," Sarah whispered, wiping away tears. "I can see it in his eyes. He looked at me like I was a stranger. I don't know how to fix it." Lisa leaned closer, her voice becoming firmer. "First of all, stop feeling sorry for yourself. You've done something wrong, and now you need to clean it up. First of all, no more Nick. Have you stopped studying with him yet?" "Yes," Sarah nodded. "I wrote to the club and refused to train. I don't want to see him." "Okay," Lisa said. "That's a start, but it's not enough. Daniel said he wants a month. Respect his decision. Don't write, don't call, give him time. In the meantime, think about how you can prove you're serious. Not with words, Sarah, with actions. Sarah looked at her sister, her eyes full of despair. But what can I do? He doesn't want to talk to me. What if he decides he doesn't want me anymore? What if he finds someone else? If he finds someone else, it will be your fault, Lisa said harshly. But I know Daniel. He loves you. He's angry, he's hurt, but he's not the type to give up easily. If you want him back, you need to show him that you'll change. No more flirting, no more innocent mistakes. You need to be the wife he deserves. Sarah nodded, clenching her hands into fists. I'll do whatever it takes. I don't want to lose him, Lisa. He's everything to me. Lisa looked at her, her gaze softening. Then start with yourself. Think about why you allowed this to happen in the first place. Not because Daniel works a lot, but because you were looking for attention somewhere else. It's your responsibility. Sarah hung her head, her shoulders shaking. You're right. I I didn't want to admit it, but you're right. I enjoyed Nick's attention. It was stupid, selfish. I didn't think it would go this far. Now think, Lisa said, and not just about how to get Daniel back, but about what kind of wife you want to be. If you really love him, you'll find a way. They talked for another hour, and Lisa stayed until evening, helping Sarah organize her thoughts. She advised her to focus on work, on yoga, on anything that would help her not go crazy with anticipation. Sarah agreed, but inside she felt empty. She knew Lisa was right, she needed to change, to be a better person, but the fear of losing Daniel was stronger than anything. Before leaving, Lisa hugged her. You can do it, Sarah, but it won't be easy. If he gives you a chance, don't let it slip away. I won't let you go, Sarah promised, although her voice trembled. When Lisa left, Sarah was alone. She picked up her phone and opened the gallery where she kept photos of her and Daniel. Here they were at a wedding, laughing, with glasses of champagne. Here they were on a hike, tired but happy. There he was, hugging her in the kitchen while she was making breakfast. She looked at those pictures, and tears streamed down her face again. She knew she had to wait, but every day without him seemed like an eternity. She lay in bed, clutching his pillow, which still smelled of his cologne. She promised herself that she would do anything to earn his trust back, even if it took months. It had been 2 weeks since Daniel had left for Denver, and for Sarah Miller, each day felt like running in circles in the void. The house in Oak Grove, once full of warmth and laughter, now felt too big and quiet. She tried to fill the time with work, teaching yoga classes, meeting with students, even taking an extra class to distract herself. But every night when she returned home, she felt Daniel's absence weighing on her. His message, no contact for a month. Don't text, still burned in her mind, and she restrained herself from disobeying his request. But waiting around doing nothing was becoming unbearable. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the notebook where she'd been writing out her class schedule. She tried to focus, but her thoughts wandered back to Daniel. She imagined him in Denver, at his office, on his laptop, or maybe at a bar with his coworkers, laughing at someone's joke. The thought sent a pang of fear through her. What if he'd already moved on? What if he'd met someone who wouldn't betray him like she had? She pushed the thoughts away, but they kept coming back, like shadows in the darkness. Lisa, her sister, came by almost every day to check on her. Their conversations were long, sometimes harsh, but Lisa was the only person Sarah could be honest with. Last week, Lisa reminded her again that waiting a month was not the same as sitting on her hands. You have to show him you're serious, Lisa said, pouring tea at their favorite cafe in downtown Oak Grove. But don't call him. That'll only make things worse. Think about what you can do to show him you're serious. I gave up golf, Sarah said, looking into her cup. I wrote to the club asking for a new coach or cancellation. I don't want to see Nick. That means something, doesn't it? That's a start, Lisa nodded. But that's not all. Daniel isn't just mad about the kiss. He feels like you've put someone else before him. You need to show him that you put him first. Sarah sighed, fiddling with her napkin. I know. But how? He doesn't answer. He doesn't call. I don't even know where he lives in Denver. He could be anywhere. Lisa looked at her, narrowing her eyes. Have you ever thought about finding him? Not to make a scene, but to show that you're ready to fight for him. If he sees that you've come, that you're not just sitting and waiting, it might change something. Sarah froze, considering her sister's words. Find Daniel. The idea seemed crazy. He'd made it clear he wanted a month without contact, and she was afraid that breaking his request would only make things worse. But Lisa was right, sitting and waiting was unbearable. She needed to act to show she wasn't giving up. What if he gets even angrier? She asked, her voice quiet. What if he says he doesn't want to see me? Then at least you'll know you did everything you could, Lisa replied. But Sarah, I saw the way he looks at you. He loves you. He's just hurt. Let him see that you're willing to fight for him. Sarah nodded, feeling a spark of determination ignite in her chest. She didn't know where to start, but the idea of finding Daniel was starting to take root. She went home and opened her laptop, determined to gather any information that might help. She knew his startup was working with a venture capital firm in Denver, and a name came to mind: Linda Crow. Daniel had mentioned her in conversations, and Sarah decided to start there. She found Crow's website online, but there was no personal information about any employees. Then she remembered that Daniel had a colleague, Travis, with whom he had once video called at home. Sarah dug through her messages and found an old chat where Daniel had mentioned his LinkedIn. She opened Travis's profile and, to her relief, saw that he listed Crow's as his current employer. This was her chance. Sarah texted Travis, trying to sound neutral. Hi, Travis. This is Sarah, Daniel's wife. Can you tell me where I can reach him in Denver? It's important, but I don't want to bother him on the phone. Any help would be appreciated. She sent the message and held her breath. A few hours later, the reply came, Hi, Sarah. Daniel is in the office every day, but he lives somewhere downtown. I don't know the exact address, but I can ask Linda. Is it urgent? Sarah replied, Yes, very much. If you could get the address or even the area, I would be very grateful. Please don't tell him I asked. Travis agreed, and the next day he sent the address of an apartment complex in downtown Denver, where Linda said Daniel was renting an apartment. Sarah felt her heart beat faster. She had found him. Now she had to decide. She booked a ticket on the next flight to Denver, which was in 2 days. She didn't know what she would say to Daniel when she saw him, but she felt she had to be there. Lisa, when she learned of her plan, approved, but warned. Don't expect him to rush into your arms right away. He may be angry, cold, but you have to be ready for that. Just show that you're there for him. I'm ready, Sarah said, though inside she was still struggling with fear. I can't just wait, Lisa. I have to try. She spent the next day getting ready for her trip. She packed a small bag, picked out a simple dress that Daniel loved, and wrote him another message, even though she knew he wouldn't respond. Daniel, I know you asked me not to text you, but I just want to say that I love you. I will always love you. She didn't send it, leaving it in drafts, afraid to violate his boundaries. The morning before her flight, she stood in front of the mirror, looking at her reflection. Her eyes were still red from crying, but there was a determination in them. She didn't know what was waiting for her in Denver, but she was ready for any outcome. She wanted to show Daniel that he was everything to her, even if it meant facing his wrath face to face. At Oak Grove Airport, she sat in the waiting room, clutching her ticket. Her thoughts swung between hope and fear. She imagined Daniel opening the door, seeing her, and maybe smiling. Or maybe he would slam the door in her face. She didn't know which would be worse, but she knew one thing: she wouldn't go down without a fight. When boarding was announced, Sarah stood up, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and walked towards the exit. It was a loud, sunny afternoon in Denver when Sarah Miller stepped out of a cab outside the apartment complex where Travis said Daniel was staying. Her heart was pounding and her palms were sweaty despite the cool breeze. She clutched the handle of a small bag that held only the bare essentials: a few changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and a photo of her and Daniel's wedding that she'd brought for good luck. It had been almost a month since their last fight, and Sarah couldn't wait any longer for Daniel to decide for himself whether he wanted to continue their marriage. She'd flown to Denver to show him that she was willing to fight for him, even if he was still angry. The apartment complex was modern, with neat flower beds and glass doors. Sarah checked the address Travis had sent her, but she didn't know the apartment number. She hoped to find Daniel in the office or somewhere nearby, so she decided to start at a nearby cafe that Travis had mentioned as a place the startup team often ate lunch. Bean and Bite was across the street, and Sarah took a deep breath and headed there. The place was crowded. Students with laptops, businessmen in suits, and a few noisy groups. Sarah glanced around the room, and her heart sank when she saw Daniel at a table in the corner. He was sitting across from a young woman with short dark hair who was talking animatedly, waving her arms. Daniel was smiling, not the wide smile Sarah loved, but enough to make her stomach clench with jealousy. She hadn't expected to see him with anyone, much less a woman who looked so confident and close. Sarah stood frozen at the door, unsure of what to do. She wanted to approach, but fear stopped her. What if he didn't want to see her? What if this woman was someone important to him? She forced herself to take a step forward, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. She was about to turn and leave when Daniel looked up and noticed her. His smile disappeared, and a mixture of surprise and tension crossed his face. "Sarah," he said, standing up. His voice was louder than he expected, and several people turned around. The woman across from him looked at Sarah too, her eyebrows raised. Sarah forced herself to walk over, even though every step felt like a challenge. "Daniel," she began, her voice shaking. I came here to talk. Please give me 5 minutes." Daniel frowned, his gaze cold. "I told you, no contact for a month. What are you doing here?" "I couldn't wait," she replied, trying not to look at the woman who was now watching them curiously. "I know you're angry, but I had to see you. I want to make things right." The woman at the table coughed to attract attention. "Should I leave?" she asked, her tone light, but with a hint of sarcasm. "It sounds like you're dealing with something personal." Daniel shook his head, not taking his eyes off Sarah. "No, Abby, stay. This is Sarah, my wife." Abby nodded, her gaze sliding over Sarah, assessing. "Nice to meet you," Abby said, but her smile was strained. "I'm a colleague of Daniel's. We're just having lunch." Sarah felt her cheeks heat up. She didn't know how to interpret the situation, but the sight of Abby Young, confident, with a sparkle in her eyes, made her feel vulnerable. "I didn't mean to interrupt," Sarah said, looking at Daniel, "but I need to talk to you. Please." Daniel sighed, his face unreadable. "Okay, 5 minutes. Let's go outside." He stood up and Sarah followed him, feeling Abby's eyes on her. It was cooler outside, and Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop herself from shivering. They walked to a bench near the entrance to the cafe, and Daniel crossed his arms, looking at her. "How did you find me?" he asked, his voice even but with a hint of suppressed anger. "Through Travis," Sarah admitted. "I wrote to him, asking where you were. I couldn't just sit and wait, Daniel. I know you're angry, and it's my fault, but I love you. I want to make things right." He shook his head, his eyes narrowing. "Fix it. Sarah, you kissed another guy. You admitted to flirting with him. And now you come here, breaking my one condition, a month of no contact. How is that supposed to help?" Sarah felt tears welling up, but forced herself to speak. "I came here because I can't live without you. I gave up golf, I gave up Nick, I gave up everything that led to this. I know I was an idiot, but I didn't cheat on you. That kiss, that was a mistake, and I stopped it. I want you to believe me." Daniel looked at her, and there was a mixture of pain and disbelief in his eyes. "You think it's just about the kiss," he said, his voice growing louder. "It's that you let it happen. You let him get so close that he thought he could kiss you. And now I'm supposed to just forget about it, forgive it because you came." "I'm not asking you to forget," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I'm asking you to give me a chance. I know I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. But I'm here because you mean everything to me. I don't want to lose our marriage. Daniel turned away, watching the cars go by. He was silent for so long that Sarah began to fear he would simply leave. Finally, he turned to her. I don't know, Sarah. I still see those pictures when I close my eyes. I still hear you say you flirted with him. I don't know if I can trust you again. Sarah took a step closer, but he raised his hand, stopping her. Don't, he said. I appreciate you coming, but it doesn't change what happened. I said a month, and I meant a month. Go home. Daniel, please, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Don't push me away. I'll do anything to prove you can trust me. He looked at her, and for a second there was a flicker of softness in his eyes, but it was gone. I'm not ready, he said. Not now. I'll be back in 2 weeks, and then we'll talk. But for now, just go. Sarah nodded, wiping away her tears. She wanted to say something else, but his gaze stopped her. She turned and walked toward the taxi, which was still waiting at the curb. Inside, she burst into tears, hiding her face in her hands. She had done everything she could, but he was not ready to listen. She was afraid that she had lost him forever. Daniel walked back into the cafe, where Abby was still sitting at a table, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as he sat down. Well, that was dramatic, she said, her tone light but careful. Is everything okay? Not really, Daniel replied, rubbing his temple. It's personal. Okay, Abby nodded, not pressing. If you want to talk, I'm here. And if not, I can just order you another coffee. Daniel gave a sad smile. Coffee sounds good. He looked out the window, where the taxi with Sarah had already driven away. Her arrival had caught him by surprise, and despite his anger, he felt a pang of guilt. She looked so lost, so sincere, but he couldn't just forget what had happened. Abby, sitting across from him, was his opposite, cheerful, carefree, and her presence was a breath of fresh air. But he reminded himself that he was still married, and despite the pain, he didn't want to become the person he despised. It was a cool evening in Denver, and the city lights reflected in the glass windows of the Skyline restaurant, where Daniel Miller and Sarah had headed after a tense encounter at the cafe. Sarah had insisted that they talk more, and Daniel had reluctantly agreed to have dinner together. He was still angry, but her determination to come to Denver, her tears and her pleas, had touched something in him. He wasn't ready to forgive, but he couldn't just send her away without hearing her out. They took a table in the corner, away from the noisy crowd, and Sarah sat across from him, fiddling nervously with her napkin. Thank you for agreeing, she said quietly, looking at him. I know you didn't want to see me. Daniel shrugged, studying the menu so as not to meet her gaze. You came here, Sarah. I'm not going to kick you out. But that doesn't mean everything is okay. She nodded, her eyes red from recent tears. I understand. I just want you to know that I'm serious. I gave up golf. I gave up Nick. I don't want anything that can separate us. Daniel looked at her, his face unreadable. You already did, he said, and his voice was cold. You let him get so close that he kissed you, and you expect me to just believe that it didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything, Sarah said, her voice shaking. I was stupid, I know, but I stopped him. I told him I loved you, and I'm here to prove it. Daniel opened his mouth to reply, but was interrupted by a noise from the entrance. He turned and froze. Nick Collins and a woman Sarah recognized immediately as Kate, his wife, walked into the restaurant. They were dressed smartly, as if on a date, and Nick was holding her hand. His face tightened when he spotted Sarah and Daniel, but he quickly looked away and headed for a table at the other end of the room. Sarah felt her heart beat faster. She hadn't expected to see Nick here, much less with his wife. She looked at Daniel and saw his jaw set and his eyes narrow. He recognized Nick's posture, his white polo shirt, his confident walk. This was the man from Mike's photographs. It's him, isn't it? Daniel asked, his voice low and dangerous. Sarah nodded, her throat tightening. Yes, this is Nick, and that woman is probably his wife. Daniel put the menu down and stood up without saying a word. Sarah grabbed his arm. Daniel, please, no. Let's just leave. No, he snapped, freeing his hand. I want to talk to this bastard. He headed for Nick's table, and Sarah hurried after him, her heart pounding. She knew Daniel was reserved, but his anger was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. Nick and Kate turned as Daniel stopped at their table. Kate, a pretty woman in her 30s with dark hair, looked at him in surprise. "Are you Nick Collins?" Daniel asked, his voice even but threatening. Nick nodded, his face becoming wary. "Yes, it's me. And who are you?" "I'm Daniel Miller," he said, looking Nick straight in the eye. "Sarah's husband. The one you kissed in the golf club parking lot." Kate gasped, her gaze darting to Nick. He paled, but quickly pulled himself together. "Listen, buddy, you got it all wrong," he said, standing up. "It was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding." Daniel raised his voice, and several people in the restaurant turned around. "I have a photo of you kissing her. Is that a misunderstanding too?" Sarah grabbed his hand, her voice full of panic. "Daniel, please, let's go." "No need for it." But he wasn't listening. Kate turned to Nick, her eyes filled with anger. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Did you kiss her?" Nick raised his hands, trying to calm the situation. "Kate, it's not like he says. It was nothing, just a moment. She herself." "She herself?" Daniel interrupted, stepping closer. "Are you serious? Are you saying that my wife provoked you?" Nick straightened up, his face hardening. "Look, kid, calm down. Yeah, I kissed her, but she didn't mind. Maybe you should ask her what she was doing at those practices." Sarah gasped, her face turning purple with shame and anger. "That's a lie," she cried. "I pushed you away, Nick. I told you I was married, that I loved my husband. How dare you?" Kate stood up, her eyes sparkling. "Nick, you promised me this was over," she said, her voice full of pain. "You said you wouldn't flirt with the students anymore. Is this happening again?" Daniel turned to Kate, his tone softer but still firm. "Ma'am, I didn't mean to ruin your evening, but your husband tried to seduce my wife. I have proof if you want to see it." Nick stepped forward, his face turning red. "That's enough, idiot," he barked. "You barge in here, ruin our dinner, accuse me of something that didn't happen. Calm down, or I'll calm you down." He pushed Daniel in the chest, and he took a step back, but quickly regained his balance. Sarah screamed. "Nick, stop. Daniel, please, don't." But it was too late. "That's enough," he said, breathing heavily, and let go of Nick. "You're not worth getting my hands dirty." Nick stood up, clutching his shoulder, his face contorted with pain and anger. "You will pay for this," he hissed. Kate turned to Sarah, her eyes full of tears. "Is it true?" she asked. "You were with my husband?" Sarah shook her head, her voice shaking. "It was just a kiss, and I stopped it. I didn't mean it, I swear. I love my husband." Kate looked at Nick, her face turning stony. "You told me it was in the past. You lied to me, Nick. Again." At that moment, two police officers entered the restaurant, having been called by one of the staff. They walked towards the table, assessing the situation. One of them, a strong man with a short haircut, looked at Nick, who was still clutching his shoulder. "What's going on here?" he asked. Nick pointed at Daniel. "This psycho attacked me. I was just having dinner with my wife, and he started yelling and pushed me." Daniel shook his head, his voice calm but firm. "He hit me first. I defended myself, and I have evidence that he tried to seduce my wife." Kate stepped forward, her voice sharp. "It's true. My husband. It wasn't the first time he did it. That man," she pointed at Daniel, "was only defending himself." Sarah nodded in confirmation. "Nick pushed him first. Daniel didn't attack." The policeman looked at Nick, who was still sitting on the floor, and nodded to his partner. "Get up," he said to Nick. "Let's go sort this out." Nick tried to protest, but was led away in handcuffs. Kate remained standing, her face a mixture of anger and pain. She turned to Sarah. "Stay away from my husband," she said coldly. "You destroyed my family." Sarah opened her mouth to reply, but the words stuck. She felt guilty, even though she knew she didn't mean to. Daniel took her hand and led her toward the exit, not looking at Kate. Outside, he stopped. His face was gloomy. "This is all your fault," he said quietly. "I hope you realize what you've done." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, and I hate myself for it. Please, Daniel, give me a chance." He looked at her but didn't answer. They got into his car, and he drove her to her hotel. It had been a month since their encounter at the Denver restaurant, and the tension between them had not eased. After the incident with Nick, who had been arrested for assault, Sarah had returned home, hoping that her determination and willingness to fight for her marriage would convince Daniel to give her a chance. But his coldness and the pain in his eyes told a different story. Today, they met to make their final decision, and Sarah felt her heart squeeze with fear. The lawyer, an older man named Mr. Hansen, sat at the head of the table, adjusting his glasses. In front of him was a document, the postnuptial agreement that Daniel had insisted on drawing up. Sarah stared at the papers, her hand shaking. She knew this was her last chance to prove she was serious, but she also knew Daniel had already made his choice. His face was stony, his eyes avoiding hers. "Mrs. Miller," Hansen began, his voice dry and businesslike. "The document before you sets forth the terms of a divorce. If you agree, you give up any rights to alimony, property, or other assets other than the current balance of your joint account, which is $2,356.42. Do you understand what that means?" Sarah nodded, her throat tightening. "Yes, I understand." Daniel looked at her, his voice even but cold. "You don't have to sign this, Sarah, but I want you to know how serious this situation is. I can't live with constantly doubting you." Sarah looked up, her eyes full of tears. "I know what I did, Daniel. I was stupid, I let Nick go too far. But I didn't cheat on you. I stopped him, and I'm here to prove that you're my everything. If this agreement makes you believe, I'll sign." Daniel shook his head, his face not softening. "It's not about the paper, Sarah. It's about you letting it happen. You flirted with him, you let him get close enough to kiss you. And I saw your face in those photos. You didn't look innocent." Sarah sobbed, her voice shaking. "I know what it looked like, and I hate myself for it. But I swear I stopped him. I told him I loved you. I came to Denver to show him that I was willing to fight for us. Please, Daniel, give me a chance." He looked at her, and for a second there was a flash of pain in his eyes, but it immediately disappeared. "I gave you a chance," he said quietly. "I listened to you in Denver. I saw you cry, how you begged. Maybe for someone it's just a kiss, a mistake. Maybe many men would forgive it. But I can't turn it off. I can't trust you." Sarah felt her world crumble. She wanted to grab his hand, to beg, but his words were like a wall she couldn't break through. "Daniel, I love you," she whispered. "I'd do anything. I'd sign 1,000 papers like this if it would restore your trust. Please don't do this." Mr. Hansen coughed to remind everyone of his presence. "Mrs. Miller, if you're ready, sign here," he said, pointing to a line on the document. Sarah looked at the paper, her hand shaking as she picked up the pen. She knew this document wouldn't save their marriage, but she hoped her willingness to sign would show Daniel how serious she was. She signed, her letters uneven but determined. She looked up at Daniel, waiting for some sign that he would change his mind. But he only nodded to the lawyer. "Thank you, Mr. Hansen," he said. "I'd like you to start preparing the divorce papers." Sarah gasped, her hand pressing to her chest. "Daniel, no," she said, her voice breaking. "Please don't do this. We can fix this. I know we can." He looked at her, and there was only fatigue in his eyes. "I can't, Sarah. I thought I could, but I can't live my life thinking all the time. You deserve to be with someone you can trust, and I'm not that person anymore." Sarah began to cry, her shoulders shaking. "You don't understand," she said. "I don't want anyone else. I want you. I've always wanted only you." Daniel stood up, his voice firm but filled with pain. "I wanted you too, but it's not enough. I'm sorry, Sarah." He turned and walked out of the office, leaving her with the lawyer. Mr. Hanson silently put the papers away, avoiding her gaze. Sarah sat, staring at the empty space where Daniel had just been. Her world, which she had tried to save, had finally collapsed. She had signed the agreement, hoping it would show her love, but instead it had become the final nail in their marriage. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.